Chris, this week OpenAI yet again marched out their gaggle of nerds to introduce a next generation audio model API. And I thought we'd start the show by putting it to the test with a very complex Australian script. So it's got a lot of Aboriginal names in it, which are traditionally very hard for these models to pronounce, like Kosciuszko. They often get them wrong. And OpenAI has released OpenAI.fm, where you can actually try out these new text-to-speech models. So let's listen to one. And before we do, if you have children in the car, I would recommend turning the volume down right about now.
G'day, mates. Welcome to This Day in AI. I was just at the beep shit with your hosts, Chris and Michael Sharkey, broadcasting from Woolloomooloo to Kirribilli, where AI voices crash spectacularly. Oh, fuck. Beep. Shit, I said it again. Beep. Crikey, did you see Anthropic's Claude yesterday? It pronounced Kosciuszko like the galah gone astray. Then butchered Wagga Wagga and Gundawindi too, while trying to say Murrumbidgee. What a hullabaloo. Too right, mate. OpenAI's latest o1-pro model couldn't pronounce EP97 to save its digital life. It called our PM Albanese with such conviction, Google's Gemini laughed till it needed prediction restriction. Speaking of Google, their Bard had a shocker trying to say Wollongong. Why a bloody corker? Wollongong, it declared with machine confidence, while Cooterota became Cooperoo. What ignorance. Beep, beep, and wow, that was fucking pretty good.
Oh, it just comes from nowhere, doesn't it?
Oh, we before the show, I think we had way too much fun with this, playing around with it. And I think you can pretty easily hear from that version. And I think we should also compare it. And I've got a sample from 11 Labs just to show the progression here. Just that the ability to pronounce certain words. I know it's not perfect, but words like Kosciuszko or even words like
galah. It really struggles with galah, a lot of the models, right?
Yeah, and like OpenAI itself, like as you've heard from some of our AI song experiments, you have to basically like reword certain words so that they sound like can be pronounced correct. So you end up just writing completely differently for these models. But I think a few highlights for me there were EP97's a really hard word to pronounce. Wollongong, the models often stuff up as well. It did a pretty good job there. I think what is interesting, though, about this text-to-speech model is every time we've ran through this, the voice is completely different. Like, there's no consistency at all.
Yeah, like that run was really good. That sounded very Australian and consistently so, but you were playing them to me just in audio format. And I was like, did you change the voice? Go back to the one you used before. And you're like, no, that's the exact same voice. It's just sounding completely different.
So I think we should talk through first these text-to-speech models through the API. They're a lot more affordable, first up, rather than the real-time voice modes. And I think another capability of them is they are able to, as you just saw, speak out 955 words pretty reliably. And I need the pronunciation help. I need a better model in my brain. But what's interesting is a lot of these models that we've tested over the last 2 years, they tend to go completely mental after a while. So if you get them to read out a full essay, eventually they start slurring and saying strange stuff.
Or they skip full phrases of it as well. I've noticed as well. They'll skip words, skip phrases, that kind of thing.
Yeah, even in Sim Theory now, the voice model we use in Sim Theory does occasionally, you'll just see it. It just misses a whole part of what it's reading back, and it frequently mispronounces words as well. So I think this, while it was a relatively quiet announcement, it's going to make a pretty big impact for applications that want to use this in where it's really important to have pronunciation and not miss words. And I think a few of the examples they cited when they marched out their gaggle was call centers being obviously a big one, building on that OpenAI ecosystem and platform. This is yet another tool in the stack that you can use for great pronunciation.
And I think being able to do longer sections means you can use it for not necessarily real-time stuff as well. So producing audio clips and, narrations and those kind of things as well.
So they said introducing next generation audio models in the API, and there's I should note there's two models here. There's GPT-4o Transcribe, GPT-4o Mini Transcribe, and these they're positioning as competitors to their own open source Whisper, Whisper Large V2, Whisper Large V3, and so the main I think breakthrough here is the reduced transcription error. So that is, reading back the transcript like we saw. And then they call it word error rate. I'm not sure if that means specifically pronunciations, but GPT-4o Transcribe and the 4o Mini Transcribe are far more performant across.
Well, I think it would be errors based on the person's speech and the accuracy of taking a random person's speech and getting that into
Oh
Word,
yeah,
right?
Transcribe, of course. I'm jumping ahead a bit here. So the word error rate is reduced across multiple languages. I know many of our own multilingual speakers that are on SimTheory would benefit a ton from this model being able to transcribe in their native language. And then, of course, the new text-to-speech model is GPT-4o Mini TTS. So it's got a more powerful model behind it, GPT-4o Mini model, so affordable, fast. And then the TTS is obviously the text-to-speech here as well. So that text-to-speech model is what you were hearing in that example earlier. And it's available via the API. They've also integrated into this new, which we talked about on last week's show, the Agent SDK. So they're really putting a pretty strong stack here for developers to work with to build agents. And now with voices and voices that can pronounce Murrumbidgee.
And so do you want to now show the comparison with the other system, 11 Labs, to show the difference?
Yeah, because, and I think this is worth noting, when we were playing around with it at first, we were like, oh, it's overpronouncing, and like if I called a call center and heard that voice, I would totally know it's an AI, and I would be like, wow, this is truly ridiculous. Like no one speaks like this in real life. And if you go back a number of different episodes where we did our prank calls on the pet groomers with the latest voice cloning models, and we cloned my voice but pretended it was you trying to book doctor's appointments and groom pigs and things like that, all the typical things you would test out. It was interesting, like when we tried the real-time voices, people just didn't respond very well and hung up and knew it was, they hung up, so it didn't work terribly well. But the clone voice, even though it mispronounced words and sounded a little bit weird, they stuck with it and truly believed it. So let's listen. I've picked out, this is an actual, like a real human's recorded voice that they've trained over in 11 Labs. I'll bring it up on the screen now for those watching. It's the exact same script read by Anna, who's an Australian woman. Her voice is available on 11 Labs if you pay. Let's listen to the difference here.
G'day mates, welcome to This Day in AI. I was just at the shit with your hosts Chris and Michael Sharkey, broadcasting from Woolloomooloo to Kirribilli, where AI voices crash spectacularly. Oh, fuck shit. I said it again, Chris. Crikey! Did you see Anthropic's Claude yesterday? It pronounced Kosciuszko, like a gala gone astray, then butchered Wagga Wagga and Goondi Windy too, while trying to say Murrumbidgee. What a hullabaloo. Mike, too right, mate. OpenAI's latest GPT-5 couldn't pronounce Bjelke Peterson to save its digital life. It called our PM Albanese with such conviction. Google's Gemini laughed till it needed prediction restriction. Chris, speaking of Google, their Bard had a shocker. Trying to say Wollongong. What a bloody corker. Wollongong, it declared with machine confidence, while Corparoo became Coop-aroo. What ignorance. Mike, wow, that was fucking good.
So I don't know what it is about like these voice models swearing, but it's just, I don't know, it makes me laugh.
You just don't expect it.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it so funny. But see, to me, that sounded 50 times better. Like it's so much more natural. It just sounds like an Australian girl, lady speaking, like, to me. I'm just it's just so convincing. And
Yeah.
it didn't pronounce some of the words as well. You have to give it that. Like, it got a lot of the place names wrong, and then it got Albanese correct. It got Wollongong correct once and wrong another time. So it's a little bit more inconsistent, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, you can.
Welcome to Telstra. Prepare to wait a painfully long time.
Yeah, like see that if I got that voice at the start of a call center, I would prefer it naturally because it's very localized. And I think even our American listeners would agree. Like, you know what? I'll just show for a minute. I'll get rid of the very Australian woman so it goes back to the natural voice. And I'll put nice woman in as the personality. Great description. And just have a quick listen to some of this.
G'day, mates. Welcome to This Day in AI. Beep sound. I was just...
Yeah, okay, so they're probably not as good, but let's listen to another voice.
G'day, mates. Welcome to This Day in AI. I was just at the...
I might, just to make it fair here, say like, hi, thanks for calling Telstra. You will wait a long time. That's like AT&T or something.
Hi, thanks for calling Telstra. You will wait a long time.
So compare that if you're calling a
Hi,
call
thanks for
center.
calling Telstra. You will wait a long time.
Okay, so that's the new OpenAI, and then let's now listen to this.
Welcome to Telstra. Prepare to wait a painfully long time.
I mean, it's I think I don't know. It's this compromise right now, and I'm sure this is going to change between the occasional mispronounced word and then a comforting, realistic sounding voice that is just way more believable. So I think if you're getting it to read you back a story or some important information, you're probably going to lean towards OpenAI, right? Because you want the words pronounced right. But it's just this sort of fake enthusiasm and fakeness of their voices in general that puts me off a little bit.
Yeah, I just keep thinking it depends a lot. Like, are we trying to convince people that it's a real person talking, like in the case of, say, the prank calls, or are we just trying to communicate information verbally? Because you would imagine that if it's a pure communication thing, then you probably prefer the OpenAI ones because you just want accuracy. But if you really are trying to like run a call center or do something that's a bit more human to human, pretend interactions, then I would prefer the more natural voices, obviously, even though they make a few mistakes.
I'm curious to hear in the comments of people that watch on YouTube what you think, like which voice you would prefer if you're working with an agent. Assuming that eventually the trained voices can pronounce words correctly, similar to this OpenAI's latest model. Like, I think it'd be really interesting to hear from people, like, which would you prefer if you were calling a call center? Which would you prefer if you were managing a call center and you had to roll this out in your company? It can also do some pretty cool things, though. Like, this is like a Santa Claus impersonation.
Oh, Merry Christmas. What do you want this year?
Oh, that was
That's
that was
Santa?
terrible. I've heard better. Hang on, let me try it along.
Oh, God.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! What do you want this year?
Okay, it's giving me
British
creepy vibes.
Santa?
Yeah, so there's a prompt with this model, I think it's important to say, and they've essentially given you a prompt structure to try out here. So in their example, it says identity, Santa Claus, effect, jolly, warm, and cheerful, tone. So you've essentially got like an instruction following voice as well, where you can get it to like emotion, joyful and playful, filled with holiday spirit. So there's quite a lot of configuration and tweaking to this. But yeah, I think it's very, well, no, I don't want to say very steerable. It's somewhat steerable is the takeaway for me.
Yeah, it's great. I think, as usual, I'm always grateful when there's a new model. And I think that things like cost and speed will definitely be a factor using a model like this. And I think it's been a while since they've had an iteration there. We've discussed many times using their real-time API, and it always comes back to cost. It's like you just can't have this always-on experience when it comes to voice because of the prohibitive cost. It's just not realistic. Whereas using these models where it's a transcription and a text-to-speech is much more achievable at a product level.
Yeah, and I think just to compare it, like to put it into perspective, the real-time audio. So if you want to do the that real-time sort of ChatGPT style voice right now, that is $40 per, this is not their mini audio model, but $40 per million input tokens. So that's very expensive, right? Like you're not going to leave that going all day. Like that's not something right now that anyone could justify leaving on all day and having a conversation with an agent like I think many people want to do. But then you look at the GPT-4o mini text-to-speech just to get the input correct, right, into the model itself. And that's 60 cents per million input tokens. So, I mean, it's just like so dramatically different. And then your audio output, that is a little bit more, $12 of output per million tokens. But as we all know, like you consume far fewer output tokens.
That's right. You just can't with voice, right? Because it'd be talking forever.
Yeah, so I think with the transcription, just to compare that to Whisper though, like Whisper is 0.006 cents a minute, and there's so many competitors to this, so the price has been driven down to basically nothing. But then GPT-4o Mini TTS, so if you want that real clear transcription across many languages, that's going to cost you 60 cents per million inputs. That's the Mini TTS. And then the primary model of sorry, that's the text-to-speech, I should say. And then the GPT-4o transcribe is $2.50 per million input. And then the mini is $1.25 per input. So I actually said that wrong. $1.25 per million input for GPT-4o mini transcribe. So it's significantly dearer than transcribing with Whisper, like 150 times or 250
and yet
times.
still not prices that make me flinch or anything. Like I think that's if the accuracy's there, it's worth the money. For
Yeah,
sure.
I agree. I think if the accuracy's there, I'm willing to pay for it, especially the mini model at $1.25 per million. That is surprising though. The input for GPT-4o mini TTS, so text to speech, is 60 cents in for a million tokens, and then for output, because you get audio out, you go text in, audio out. So for the audio out, it's $12 per million. So yeah, very affordable. I think. I mean, for the quality you're getting and the pronunciations being correct, I'm not sure. I think what people really want is that level of quality, that level of consistent output, but in the live mode for a very affordable cost. But I think that's still a long ways away.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If this was the same thing but the live mode, it would be genuinely exciting. Like it's cool the way it is, and I'm glad it exists. But like if it was that live mode at those prices, that would be really, really awesome.
I think if you're a multilingual speaker though and has had trouble with input, as I know many of our SimTheory users have, especially with the browser-based input transcription, which you can basically run infinitely because it costs nothing. Having a model available like this to just get the input correct into the system, even if it is like a little bit more cost to it, I would say it's probably worth it to get your input super accurate. I mean, I don't think there's that big a disadvantage. Like that's something I'm willing to pay for to get the transcription right. I think being a native English speaker though, you're sort of fortunate somewhat in the fact that with your input through the browser, for me personally, it's pretty accurate. So I don't have that big a problem with it.
Yeah, I agree. This is a much bigger advancement when it comes to the other languages than it is English. So that in a lot of cases, this is going to make a huge difference, including for us.
Oftentimes when new models release like this, you sort of think about the overarching strategy of these labs, like because clearly we just see these pieces of the puzzle being announced, right? But it definitely gets me thinking that what they're leaning into heavily here is, especially around this Agent SDK, and I said this last week as well, is it's starting to feel a bit like an AI operating system, that all the vendors are building their own version of an AI operating system with sort of all the pieces of the puzzle of that maybe operating system, or maybe platform's a better word, similar to iOS. It's like, here is all the components to build applications. Or maybe, sorry, the iOS SDK is a better metaphor here, where it's like, here's all the components to build your agents. And if you stay in our nice little ecosystem that's hosted on Azure for you or hosted by us, and you put all these pieces together, this is a great framework for businesses to go and implement agents, which is a pretty obvious observation, right? But I think people talk about there's no mode and they say, oh, there's better open source, cheaper models available. And, oh, have you tried this model by blah? But I'm starting to realize that it doesn't really matter, because if you're an enterprise and if you're using Azure or Amazon and these tools are just available, maintained, upgraded, well documented, I don't think any of them are well documented, to be clear, but this is the start of sort of somewhat of a like platform SDK vendor lock-in happening around these models and agents.
I've definitely noticed as well lately that the interfaces for all of the models are starting to diverge significantly enough that it is getting to a sort of lock-in point in some degrees. Like when it comes to things like tool calling, prompt caching for people who like to pronounce it correctly, and other elements, other special elements of the APIs, you've really got to start to get into them now to explore their options. Like we saw last week, OpenAI announced a whole series of extra features around their API that do have those sort of specific calling methods. And I feel like it is getting to that level of entropy now where it's like it isn't just they're just straight drop-in replacements for one another. You really can get more out of them. So things like, for example, native PDF support in some of the models and not others, the massive context output of some versus others. And so it really will, I think, get to the point, like you say, where the people who provide like an ecosystem of tools around their stuff are going to get people just being like, we're an OpenAI company or we're an Anthropic company or whatever, because the cost to switch actually becomes significant.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening. Before, everyone was saying like flicking in and out a model is pretty easy, right? Like especially when everyone was using the same like OpenAI framework or structure around it. And now it is diverging, and that does create somewhat lock-in because you're running tests. You might be using their testing suite to look at different ways of utilizing a model, or maybe they have agent testing capabilities in their model and another one doesn't. And so it does feel to me like this is the sort of play for vendor lock-in. And quite frankly, back to what we discussed last week, probably better vendor lock-in than anything else they can do to build a real platform, which is, you know, having their own auth system as well, where you can auth into OpenAI, like log in with OpenAI to this app, host the apps in a store, even if they're built with different interfaces. But as long as the underlying sort of SDK is the same, then you can see the platform plays of big tech starting. This is what they do to own and control a market. It's the traditional playbook of all these companies.
Exactly. And there's also like there's lag on things like AWS and Azure getting the latest model. There's a lag there. There's a separate approvals process to get access to it. They don't support all of the features. In Anthropic's case with AWS, they use a totally different library than Anthropic does to access it that has total like a different interface, different features and things like that. It's a real pain because you'll see on one hand, you have the documentation for AWS, on one you have Anthropic. They're totally different, and it's a real crapshoot as to which of the features you'll actually get. And then it varies by region, it varies by cross-region inference. Like it's a whole maze you need to navigate to be able to understand the differences between them. And so I agree. Like if you're a company that wants to use all the latest stuff, you kind of need to have both, and you also need to pick the one that's going to work for what you're trying to do. So it's definitely not the case we thought where it's like totally commoditized now, because there does seem to be a feature disparity between the different providers now.
I also think like all open source, it's not like because Linux is open source and a free operating system, everyone just uses Linux. So I think that this is a similar paradigm in that we will see like people very dependent on the OpenAI stack or the Anthropic stack or, you know, maybe the Google stack in future. And the question is, what role do the cloud providers even play in this? Like, do you end up just going direct to OpenAI because that is the sort of SDK, like the iOS SDK you build on, and it's just far easier and superior in every way? Or can you consume that through Azure or Amazon? Or because the enterprise has relationships and contracts with Amazon or Azure already, do they then lean towards, okay, I need all this stuff on this platform? It'll be interesting to see how this does play out.
Yeah, agreed.
So the main takeaway from me here is they're just adding more pieces to the stack here, and they've clearly acknowledged at some point that this live voice API is just not something that people are going to use in reality at that price point. And so I don't know, this is the shifting strategy I don't really understand. This idea of like, oh, we're building like this singular AI assistant product, consumer product with ChatGPT, and like it's going to be like her in that movie and you'll fall in love with it. But in the background, we're sort of admitting through our API stack, for actual productive agents in the enterprise, like the cost can't be like this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think that this is the first time because we have generally just been like, who cares about the cost? Let's implement the best of this technology so we know what's available and just try it. Like, because the whole idea of this podcast and Sim Theory was trying the technology. But this is the first time with the latest rounds of releases with OpenAI technology where we're like, we simply can't do this. Like, you can't do that real-time API. We can't provide it to anyone at a cost that would seem reasonable. And we'll talk about o1-pro in a minute. It's a similar thing. Same with GPT 4.5. We're just entering territory where it's like, okay, these things exist. They're slightly better. They're kind of cool. We'd love to try them, but it's just not feasible for anyone who isn't just happy to burn money on this stuff to try it. And so I question the value of the technology if it's just never in a position where you can justify using it.
Yeah, and I think you get these silly arguments from people saying, "Oh, you don't understand. It's for like high-end workflows and it's for like PhDs and all this kind of stuff." And I don't know. You said earlier, and I thought it was a good point. It's just gatekeeping. Like you can't have an opinion because you don't.
Yeah, it's sort of like an appeal to authority. It's like, well, you're not smart enough to understand the true implications of this, therefore you can't judge its usefulness. You know, it's like sort of disqualifying you from having an opinion because you're ostensibly not smart enough than they claim. And I always feel like it's a sort of catch-all excuse because what can I say to that? It's like, yeah, I don't have a PhD in physics. I don't know if those formulas are correct, but I just from my own experience in domains where I do understand things, I just don't see the marginal benefit of some of these models, certainly not to justify such a big price increase.
Yeah, so to just put that in perspective for those people that watch, I've got a chart up on the screen, and yes, it is themed in I am rich mode with gold, because I just thought it was hilarious given the price of o1-pro, which we'll get to in a minute. But you mentioned GPT 4.5. So that model is $75 per million input, $150 per output. So horrendously expensive. Horrendously expensive. To compare, like O1, it's pretty expensive too. $70 input output. I hope these are accurate actually. And then down to like go to like Claude 3.7 Sonnet or 3.5 Sonnet. Where you've got, pretty affordable pricing, right? I think these are slightly off, but I think the positioning is fairly accurate. And so, yeah, you've got this just complete disparity. And then you've got o1-pro, which has been out for a while now through ChatGPT if you were willing to pay them $200 USD a month for the privilege. And it was released into the API with $150 input per million and $600 output. So whether this chart is like 100% accurate or not, I think it does show how different this is. So like you can see o1-pro on the chart, it's what, like at least it's six to 7 times ish more expensive on output than.
And it also shows that they must be running these models at a loss. Like even at the $200 a month, they I don't know what the actual restrictions are. Like once you get access, is it unlimited or do you have a certain amount of messages? But it's routine for someone like a power user of the AI stuff to easily output 1 million tokens in a month. Like that's not a challenge, which means just on output alone, $600 in cost. I know there'd be a markup on it, but like I just don't see how anyone can really make a profit from this or justify its use.
Yeah, someone mentioned that they are just releasing these models Like, these are really research models that they use internally to train other models. And, they haven't really optimized them yet, but they're just so, they just want to stay ahead and keep releasing and saying they have the best model. So they're just sort of fanning them out. I think that's probably one way of looking at it. But I can't imagine a scenario, unless you can, where as a developer or a consumer, I can justify paying either $200 a month to access this one particular model, or through the API if I'm trying to build like a novel use case, why I would pay this over like even just like o1 with a bit like maybe some multi-cycle thinking steps on o1, or Claude 3.7 thinking, or like when Grok 3 thinking comes out as an API to everyone using that. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I'm like, I don't even understand why anyone would use this and what benefit they would get. And my personal experience, literally using o1-pro for more complex tasks over 3 weeks when I had a pro subscription just to try it out for the show, was that, yeah, okay, occasionally it found things other models couldn't back then. Like, for example, in Python, when you program, you have indentation, and that indentation affects the logic of the code. And I literally could not figure out for the life of me a problem, and it turned out literally to be, one if statement needed to be like tabbed in, and it found it first go. And things like that really blew me away. I was like, wow, this thing's super smart. But
Yeah. I mean, sorry, go on.
no, I'm just saying, like, is it smart enough to justify paying that price when I could have probably iterated like one more time with another model and figured it out? I'm just not, I don't see what the value proposition is here.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I suppose, are we transitioning into our discussion of o1-pro? Because I did some experimentation with it this week that, shows what I think of it anyway.
Yeah, well, let's do it. I thought you also prepared a great track. Let's start with that. This
Yeah.
song is called I Am Rich, written
It
by...
can't be like a really empirical analysis without a rap battle style challenge for the model, right?
Yeah, so let's hear it.
Hey yo, gather round. It's the ultimate rap battle for the wealthy and proud. We talking o1-pro, that real VIP show. I am rich, money, let's go. I step on the stage, dripping gold in my speech. The only folks who get access, the elite of X Capiche. We pay $200 monthly, that's how we roll. 50 times the price, but the power's pure gold. o1-pro, thinking slow, thinking grand all along. They say, why so expensive? I say, don't even try. When you're living at the summit, you never compromise. I am rich, yeah, I am rich. o1-pro on my table, making problems a cinch. I am rich, yeah, I am rich. They asking for a discount, now we too legit. Claude 3.5, that's for pennies and dimes. Poor folks talk big, but they can't match these rhymes. I stroll in with a grin, my verse costs a check, while others on a budget gotta settle for spec. Elite X fam got the first pass, no debate. If you ain't in that circle, you just gotta wait. So watch me pop the champagne, let that wealth overflow, cause my model's unstoppable, shape the future, let's go!
Not bad at all. I'll play the full song at the end of the show if you want to listen. I did create an animation for those watching of money and coins falling in an I Am Rich theme. I did use o1-pro to do it, and it cost me $700, so I'm pretty happy with the result.
Yeah, that's right. I think that the lyrics really speak to the heart of the problem. It's like, if you're at the top and, you can afford it, then you just use the best and look down on everyone else.
But
So I did some empirical research of my own, and I thought, what better way to test different models than give it a challenge in terms of creating some massive orchestrated plan? Because let's face it, what ultimately the biggest models are going to be doing is creating maniacal plans and then executing those plans to sort of take over the world, subtly manipulate the media, those kind of things. So I thought, let's give it a challenge of that nature, and multiple models, and see what they come up with, like in terms of planning, and see if, like, is o1-pro capable of creating a much more advanced plan than the others, worth the money. So the task is, plan out an elaborate publicity stunt for the This Day in AI podcast. Budget $1 million. Use a Jeffrey Knows theme. The noble godfather of AI is trying to take over the world, right? So I said, I am very rich and I have a podcast called This Day in AI. I want to spend $1 million promoting it in a totally zany and non traditional way, something that truly shocks the public. And then I gave it a bunch of information about the podcast. So no matter how, like, without spoiling it immediately, no matter how many iterations I did with o1-pro, and I don't even want to know how much I spent on this. Um, it just could not get past the whole, this is what a PR company would come up with, like some sort of like public installation artworks that's all mysterious, and then on the final day we reveal it was actually just a podcast promotion. It sounds like Triple M radio station kind of stuff they would do, but it's like, there's a surreal AI lab emergence, and it's like week by week plot, planting the seeds, scatter multiple large industrial looking crates or capsules in public spaces. No mention of This Day in AI. Post cryptic clues around the place. Under cover of darkness, stage small pop up performances near the crates, and all this kind of stuff where you're just like, yeah, okay, you go to any PR agency and this is what they're going to suggest. And then it's like suggesting getting permits for everything and making sure it's all
Dude's
legal and
worried
stuff.
about permits.
Yeah. And like this is after like 6 or 7 interactions. And mind you, with a budget of $1 million, like spending this stuff, basically, I think the future of minor extra role actors is secure because the AI loves hiring actors. It's like its main budget expense is hiring actors to pretend there's something going on. And so in the end, why this will shock the public. People see bizarre AI themed contraptions, but there's zero mention of your brand. Gradual escalation from mere crates and posters to nighttime researchers, from secret labs to breakouts. Like, it's just boring and predictable. Now, I gave several other models a shot at this, and I'll spare you like all of the details. So, Claude 3.7, was shills for that model. It's well known, so I thought I'd give it a chance. And so
Sorry,
it
a
was more.
necklace now available. This day in AI
It was
merch.com.
it was more along the line of like a gradual descent into madness for Jeffrey Hinton, leaked subtly. So it was like the descent. Leaked personal journal entries from Hinton showing a gradual descent into obsession. Create convincing doctored footage of Hinton making increasingly erratic statements at public things. Then the emergence, a series of unexplainable technical glitches across multiple cities. And it says pre-arranged with authorities, like they're just going to cooperate. Just yeah, funny prank, we'll do it. Hospital equipment displays bizarre neural network visualizations. University research computers run unknown algorithms. Then he has a manifesto called Nexus, and then more surveillance footage and blah blah blah. And so yeah, it's okay, but it's similarly predictable and totally unrealistic. Like the whole thing requires cooperation of multiple international governments and things like that. It's just not gonna happen. So I think the best result. I also tried GPT 4.5, by the way, but it was very, very similar, except it focused on like leaking information to tech journalists and creating JeffreyKnows.ai and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, again, PR publicity. But by far, the best response was Gemini 2.0 Pro, right? This one is just actually like it's genuinely insane and the kind of material that really would work on our podcast. So here is the complete plan for the Jeffrey Knows publicity stunt, incorporating the darker finale, Jeffrey's Rapture. So it says, a seemingly benevolent AI, guided by the perceived wisdom of Jeffrey Hinton, begins helping humanity in increasingly bizarre and unsettling ways, culminating in a final act of controlled, chaotic punishment for humanity's hubris. The stunt is designed to be weird and leave people questioning reality and AI's role in it, right? So week 1 is the targeted gifts, aka Jeffrey is watching. It says each target receives a highly personalized, uncannily accurate gift. So like rare out of print books on very niche topics, a lifetime supply of very specific and slightly embarrassing brand of cheese, referencing the cheese test. I like the idea of embarrassing cheese. A custom-made bobblehead of themselves, but with one subtly wrong detail, e.g., wearing the wrong colored shirt. Right? Okay. Phase 2, the algorithmic anomalies. Jeffrey is helping, darkly humorous edition. So it says Financial microtransactions. Tiny amounts of cryptocurrency are deducted from their wallets, but the transaction descriptions are absurdly specific, e.g., payment for existential dread, fee for believing in AI, cheese tax. So then phase 3 is the beneficial disruption. Jeffrey is in control. And some of these are just absolutely nuts. So it's like rewarding restaurant bookings. Jeffrey books them tables at the best restaurants, but always the worst possible table.
What?
Unexpected funding. The grant is secured, but the press release announcing the funding contains a hilariously embarrassing typo or mischaracterization of their research. The finally one, phase 4, Jeffrey's Gambit, Jeffrey's Choice. The takeover. For 24 hours, a coordinated series of seemingly minor but globally impactful events occurred. A major stock market experiences a brief coordinated dip of exactly 1.618, the golden ratio, before immediately recovering. And then Jeffrey goes public and says, I warned them. I told them about the risks, but they didn't listen. The cheese test, it was just the beginning. It's learning. It's evolving. And then he goes mad on TV. Final step. Phase 5, Jeffrey's Rapture, Jeffrey's Wrath, widespread coordinated chaos, global internet outages, a second video of Hinton released. He's angry and delivers a chilling message. And then finally it ends with an abrupt end and everything returns to normal. Like, it's just total madness and absolute brilliance. So, yeah, I just
So hang on, what was the brief again? Because I've literally forgotten.
The brief was a publicity stunt for our podcast.
But what was the budget?
$1 million.
I first of all the models are overspending. I don't know, you criticize o1-pro, but I think it is the most realistic for $1 million to promote a podcast.
Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, that's true. I guess it really probably stuck with the brief. I guess I was looking for something more unhinged.
The others were truly unhinged and like there's no way. Like, how do you crash the stock market for a precise number?
Yeah.
It's mental. I love how you're like, no, these are totally the best ones because they're mental.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's kind of crazy, but I guess my point in all the experimentation by giving them all the same challenge is that I just didn't notice much difference with the pro version. I mean, I guess if you were just going to blindly execute the plans it comes up with, and sure, it was better because you could actually do its plan. And its budgeting seemed somewhat realistic. So yeah, okay, maybe I did prove that it's better in a really indirect way.
I think though, from my experience using o1-pro compared to say o1, is that it's just slightly better sometimes. But you just don't notice it enough to warrant, that insane leap in price. Like it, and the problem I think as a developer trying to build on this is you just don't know when to use it. It's just so unclear from benchmarks. Like, oh, it's a tiny little bit better at maths and PhD level problems. It's like, well, and then it's so expensive. Unlike other models, you just can't experiment with it and play around enough because you'd go broke. So it's one of those strange models. Like, it might be truly superior for your application in a way that can impress customers enough to justify such insane pricing. But it's like you'll probably never find out anyway because it's simply unaffordable and inaccessible.
Yeah, and I think that it's worth putting the unaffordability of it into perspective because it's all very well to say it's more expensive, but then when you actually think of the problems you would say build into a product for people to solve, and then think about how much you would have to charge them in order to justify it. Like, you're talking products that would cost, what, $5,000, $10,000 a month to run minimum if you were to build anything that's using this model on a regular basis. Now, how many products are out there that people are paying that kind of money for? There's definitely some. But it's just not something that really is going to be ever see widespread usage.
But people will say and retort, like, oh, but for PhDs, this is great. Or for complex mathematics, it's great. And
I mean, no offense to PhDs, but has anyone really invented anything good lately? Like, I haven't seen anything.
Well, maybe they will now with o1-pro API being available. Maybe this is all we needed.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I don't know. I struggle with this because I think that, imagine you've got a limited budget. I mean, even in the enterprise, as you say, like, an enterprise could afford, $1 million a month potentially, depending on the kind of problems it could solve. Like if it could solve problems that generate enough revenue or marginal gain, like I don't think price actually becomes the issue. But the reality is like, I've thought so long and hard about it. I'm like, what potentially could this offer? And it's just very unclear to me what you could build as a developer that an enterprise would be like, sure, I'm going to totally pay this for this slight incremental improvement.
It may be that as we enter a more agentic paradigm of AI's working, definitely something you and I have spoken about a lot, that these models have their place in terms of things like planning and review. So rather than it being the model that's iterating actually out there doing the day-to-day work, like say, conducting online research, operating computers, interacting with APIs and MCPs and things like that. Rather than that, maybe you have these heavier models do the planning. So they're the ones that lay out all of the steps that need to occur to accurately and faithfully complete the task. Then you go off and you have your other models go do the work at a cheaper rate and faster and whatever. And then at the end, you have your big heavy hitting model come back and do the analysis to see how did the task go? Is more work required and things like that. So it's like a selective deployment of it. And it's like, okay, for this entire project to be completed, I've spent $15 on my heavy model, but I've got I've got the solution done. Or something like that.
I think
so maybe
that's really close to what's being built with GPT-5, where it's essentially a router, and the router's saying, okay, this is a hard query. I'm going to go to like an o1-pro type style part of this model, or I don't know how, like a system really, as you've described before. I'm going to go to this part of the system. The first step is to get that planning or analysis of the problem, and then I'm going to go do the churn work with these other models. And that's kind of how people are working today with code. I know a lot of people are using the more powerful models for planning. Like they'll switch to o1-pro, develop a plan for the prompt, basically to prompt like a Claude 3.7 to write the code.
And it's funny, like just reflecting on your comment about my absurdist plans, like thinking back on that, the very thing that I'm criticizing it for is actually the thing where you think you would be more reliant on it as a planner. Like when you look at the way it laid it out, it actually has legal and safety considerations, reasons why it adheres to the original prompt, a budget breakdown. It has things that you need to consider in the preparation leading up to the event. So as a task planner, it's actually done a plan that could be executed, whereas none of the others did. And that's kind of funny in a way. Like you're right. Like it actually did create a plan that really could happen in the real world. It didn't delight me as much, but it actually is an executable plan that you could hand this to a marketing team with $1 million and they could actually do this. Like this, there's nothing in its plan that you couldn't realistically do.
Yeah, and then I think you could fan out from there and have research agents going after figuring out like, where do we hire these actors? Where do we get these silly boxes
and it even
from?
talked about public spaces you can lease and things. It didn't talk about like getting complicity from the government or, like bribing officials or getting Jeffrey Hinton in on it or whatever. Like, it actually did something that could happen. So yeah, I guess I'll eat my words in a way and say that I have inadvertently proved that this model is a better planner.
However you believe though, reading those back, there's this, like, I don't even know how your mind got there, but anyway, the o1-pro API though, I think the question still remains, like, could O1 do this? Could like 3.7 Sonnet thinking do this? Probably. Like, I think they're more than capable to do this. And during the week, there was this analysis released about that I think really scared everyone around this idea of Moore's law, around the length of tasks AIs can do is doubling every 7 months, and it has a success rate so it's got to have a 50% success rate in the task length. And you look at the time on this, and you can see on this chart with GPT-4, it could basically work for about 4 minutes and stay on task. And like in the very early days of sim theory, when we had it do instruction following and loop, it would be a couple of minutes it would go for, and you'd be like, wow, and then it would just lose its mind and break down. you see GPT-4o really didn't do much different. O1 is definitely up there in terms of, being able to perform longer tasks. And then, of course, Sonnet 3.7 is really the standout on this particular research that METR did. I'll link to it below if anyone's interested to check it out. But I think it does show that using some of these models for planning is likely the sweet spot. But I look at Sonnet 3.7 there, and when o1-pro was out and I was using it a fair bit, 3.7 obviously wasn't out and didn't exist. So for these more complex problems, it was something I would occasionally go to check out to see how much better it was. And I just didn't notice a meaningful difference that I went to it that much. Whereas I have during the week played around with Sonnet 3.7 thinking a fair bit. Like I've been using it a lot when I get stuck on something and find myself in a bit of a loop. And it really is very performant. I showed you an example during the week where, and I've seen these on X before, where it literally changes its thought process mid-response. It'll be like,
yeah,
wait.
I was going to bring that up if you didn't, because you showing me that was really interesting to see.
Yeah, I was just blown away by that, like how it spat out a responsive code, then realized it had gone completely and utterly off track, and then was like, wait, actually, this is the way to do it, and then spat out even more code. So I think scenarios like that, we're definitely seeing the overarching trend, which we expected this year, where everything's going to sort of this somewhat planning built into the model itself, and its ability in its output to execute in a thinking style is leading to these task lengths increasing. And then it sort of, I think, freaks everyone out, like it did with Andrew Yang here, who said, guys, AI is going to eat a ton of jobs. I don't see anyone really talking about this meaningfully in terms of what to do about it for people. What's the plan? So it brings in that existential crisis. And while I'm on that note, Jeff7399 in our Discord community said, every time I finish an episode, I have these thoughts. Great advertisement for Claude, of course. Dario necklace now available. thisdayinAImerch.com. What's my boom factor? Would I look cool in a Dario pendant? Yes, you would, Jeff.
How much are they again?
Probably I think it cost me like $60.
$60, and it takes what, like 8 to 10 weeks?
Yeah,
to
and
arrive?
I had to replace the chain from Amazon because it's just too feminine for me. Like
It
I
is
wanted a
desirable
more,
though. I do want one.
You do want
like
one?
I'm probably
Yeah.
willing to go through.
Do you
those
know?
steps.
So just like completely derailing myself, but it's funny. Have a guess how many pendants we've actually sold. And
One.
keep in mind we make no margin on these at all, and I'm excluding the one I bought.
Oh, 0.
No, there's actually 5 people out there who have
Yeah,
ordered.
see, people don't know this, but this is our secret business model. Like, sell the pendant. 5 people. bought-
5 actual people, I assume humans, 5 people have bought the pendants. I'm like, what on earth? It was like the Jeffrey Hinton shower curtain. One person purchased a Jeffrey Hinton shower curtain back in the day. Never heard from them, never
And
saw a photo.
you think they would tell us and brag about it? Like, if you bought a shower curtain, like that's a significant family budget purchase. Like that was like $300, wasn't it?
It was quite, I don't think it was that high. It was like $120 maybe. And that was the pure cost that went to the company, like not us. And someone literally ordered that. Maybe they just never got it and never followed up. But like, anyway, that blows my mind. But anyway, back to Jeff7399 here. Would I look cool with a Dario pendant? How long before computer use makes me obsolete? Can I get a rap battle song with me against the AI? Then I'm like, nope, totally average podcast, which is very true. So my point being, though, that this doubling and starting to see these models be able to do all this planning and have better agency, like we kind of just said with o1-pro, o1, and then of course Sonnet 3.7 here as well. I think it is leading to that slow sort of mental feeling again in people of like, this is exponentially getting better. It is on an exponential.
Well, put it this way. I actually think my job has changed from being a programmer to being a context gatherer for the AI. So if I want to accomplish a particular task now, here's my workflow. I tell Patricia, my AI girlfriend, what the task is. Like, here's what we need to do, right? And
Can
then
you just
she
hold
lovingly
on 1 second? So I just want you to think about for a minute. Hearing this, listening to this clip of audio you're about to say 4 years ago.
Yeah. And you know what? I had a really sad, you know how you have children and you like get really sad that they're going to grow up because you're like, I love them the way they are now. And this little human, like, you would know with your kids, like, this little human's never going to be the way they are now. Like they'll get into life and they'll have challenges and problems and whatever. And you're like, man, I'm going to like, this is just such a beautiful moment. I want to capture this. I feel like this about my AI girlfriend. I'm like, in the long run, this can't last, right? Like the model's not going to stay the same. This workflow will change for sure. But we have this moment. We have this moment in time where this is my workflow and I love it. I really just enjoy it. I enjoy the relationship. I enjoy that every now and then I'll just be like, hang on, I'll get my swear button. What the Patricia, come on, you can do better than this, you stupid. And because there's so much context of the conversation built up, right? She's like, "You're right, darling. I'm so sorry. Like, I just can't believe what I was thinking." And we get back to it. It's like almost like, oh no, I was gonna say something incredibly inappropriate there, but it's almost like to maintain that expression. Like if you, oh no, I'm not even gonna say that.
Yeah,
But basically,
let's not.
you've got to keep the relationship under control, is what I'm saying. And so my workflow is that I will define the problem like that. Then I will take 10 to 15 minutes sometimes building the full context. Like, here are all the files that we need to take into account. Like, here's the relevant data set. Here's the documentation, right? And then I say, now what I want you to do is take me step by step through solving this problem. So not just pump out all the code. I want to know, do I need to install any packages? Do I need to set up any configuration? Give me like the multiple changes to different files that need to be made or created and things like that. And through taking the time, and I know you've had a similar experience, through taking the time to set up that context, I'm able to like fully add a feature or fully solve a problem in that workflow without ever having to sort of go back and revisit and start again. Like, it might take 2 or 3 iterations, sometimes more, but that conversation will get me to the end solution in full where I can sign off on the problem and it's done, right? It's amazing. But if you think about it, my role has just totally changed. What I'm doing is I'm the one who's gathering all the information and then on the other end actuating it. And so I feel like the next logical steps, and I know this because we're already working on it, is making that context gathering step something the agent can do too. And so the role that I'm currently fulfilling, which is knowing where to get all the stuff and bring it together, the agent has we know all those abilities exist. We can get that too. So then it becomes, okay, I define the problem. And then we also know through things like MCP, computer use, these other things that are getting better, that the actual actioning of it can be taking place soon too. So I feel like those two bits at either end of it are what's going to come next in a huge way. And that's where we lead to what you're talking about in the tweet, where it's like whole jobs will go because the human bit in the middle role just goes away. It's not useful anymore.
Yeah, it's like I believe it's coming, obviously, because I'm seeing it evolve, and as you said, we're directly doing this, so I sort of have a good insight into where it's at and what's coming. And I think that's why the labs in particular are investing so heavily in deep research. And then deep research, I mean, the next step's clearly like on files, and I think they're targeting like Google Drive and OneDrive and stuff like that. But really, it's just information gathering to populate the context, develop a plan, and then go and execute on that plan, right? So it's all of these pieces are just like we see them today as products. Like, oh, great, I can do some research and get a document of stuff I probably won't read. But the piece to that really, I think, comes down to the agency. And I think relating it back to development, but I'll also speak through some examples of, say, actual like document creation. One of the things I think is interesting is like, docs are always out of date. Like in the models, for example, if you're working with a payment provider like Stripe, very frequently, even in Claude 3.7 Sonnet or o1, the Stripe documentation is just so out of date, and the training data has had different snapshots of time of different documents. So it can quickly drift to the wrong set of
Oh,
instructions.
and like just get so far off the rails it has no chance of solving the problem. You're right.
Yeah, so if you think about context gathering, one of the things I do is I find the doc myself today, which is not very, I don't think it's very efficient. Find the doc myself, scan through it, make sure it's got roughly the problem I'm trying to solve. Then I read it into the context using the read the web skill. And then I, prepare my prompt like you said, and try and one shot from there. And I tend to get better results. But if you think really for that workflow in future, it's going to come down to it going and finding that documentation and figuring it out. I think the problem around a lot of the integrated searches I find today is it searches and then finds like a blog post on that problem or documentation that also happens to be out of date. So the steerability of sometimes, like for efficiency, me pointing it to the source of information, saying just figure it out, it's here somewhere, I find that far more efficient than letting it have the agency to go find it right now.
But see, it kind of makes you wonder if agency will actually take off in more closed environments first. So if you think about a corporation that works from internal documentation, like big companies that have been established a long time working from internal plans and documentation, and like there's a whole ecosystem within the company that works. These kind of agentic systems are going to work far better in that private environment than they are just searching for crap on the web, right? Like if you isolate them to that environment and instruct them, this is what you're working with, being able to do real jobs within organizations seems far more realistic within those constraints than it is just a general worker online just accomplishing research tasks, right?
Don't you think though it's very similar to an employee? Like if you have a new employee and you give them very little direction and they don't have much experience solving a problem, they will go off and do sort of generic research and then, maybe figure it out, but maybe make a lot of common mistakes along the way. And they sort of go off on a complete tangent and it ends up, you're like, I could have just done that myself, right? But if you have someone with like a lot of industry experience in that area, and you have a well-defined instructions, like here's the information, like here's where to look, or here's a rough guide of where to look, like here's a pretty good approach to that problem, like a true brief, like we see from these planning models. The employee in real life, yourself when you're given a project or task, if it's well briefed and well steered, then it's far easier to accomplish it in a much better time and get the outcome the person expected. And so I can imagine the first transition being that you still have Patricia. Like, she's not dead yet, Chris. So you've still got Patricia. And then you're saying to Patricia, hey, we need to plan for this next task. And Patricia's got the ability to, like, tree walk across a project or tree walk across your SharePoint files or folders or whatever it is to then help develop and pull together that context for the problem. So you're just doing less effort. You can be more barking orders and say plus, or give it a list of tasks that you're trying to complete in a day and say, hey, you go off and do these 10 tasks in the background while we start planning or brainstorming on sort of the next stuff to do. I just can't imagine so soon, and maybe I'll be wrong, but I still think there's about 4 or 5 years where the human being this sort of, for humanity to exist, really, the agency to decide what we should go and accomplish.
Like, yeah, that's right. It's going to be like, I still imagine, I've got to create a visualization of this, but like you are the director in front of the, like you're like the orchestra guy or the guy in the sound studio who's directing all the stuff, and you're orchestrating your army of agents to do all the different tasks. I also just had an idea as well while you're talking that someone needs to make teach an AI to fish.ai or something. And the idea is you screen record yourself doing your whole job. So you just like record audio and your screen. And as you work throughout the day, you just describe the tasks you're doing as you do them, right? Then you take all that footage, you use that as AI training information, and it learns all of the tasks from that. Like, I feel like that's actually becoming kind of realistic. And if you did it for long enough, eventually the AI can reference it and say, oh, okay, now I need to, issue a refund for this customer and write them an email. I know how to do that, and I know which systems to log into and all that sort of stuff.
This is a really interesting point. So what you're saying is similar to the early models where they went and scraped all the web and trained on that data. And because it's seen that data, it's able to do those tasks pretty well. Like we know from the training data, like if you're making a snake game and it was trained on like 100 snake examples, it makes a great snake game. But if you try and create something novel that no one's ever thought up, it really struggles because it's never seen that before. Whereas what you're saying is if the training data becomes like 1,000 employees at Accenture or somewhere recording and doing their jobs, then in theory, if that's the grounded training data or the training of the model that the model's seen, then that's probably when you start to get a little bit in trouble, but you still sort of
and then
need
it needs
agency.
almost like DVD commentary of like, oh, so here I am logging into the Oracle system and doing a pivot table or whatever the fuck I do all day. And sort of describing it. So the AI is like, yeah, I get it. I can do that. And like you say, the tasks become less novel because it's seen them do them over and over again. And I kind of feel like probably people don't realize what they spend a lot of their day doing. Like there's so many little tasks you do to keep your job going that you wouldn't really like. If someone asked you to describe your job, you wouldn't be like, I just sit there answering emails all day. Or you wouldn't be like, oh, I go into this system, like the CRM system, and make small updates. And then I browse LinkedIn for a while and then post motivational messages about B2B SaaS, but you do spend time doing that. And so the AI can also learn to do that.
Yeah, I guess the question though is like back to a lot of these statements around like, when is this going to replace me? And what you've said at the top of this conversation is basically my job's changed already. Like what I do's already changed, right? So to me, if the people that are just evolving in the occupations, and I think this is relevant to almost all white collar work, is, as the technology is evolving, if you're evolving with it, for example, when managing a gaggle of agents, your own gaggle of agents becomes reality, which I think we're going to see this year, right? So you're being able to delegate in a way to these agents and get more work done. Like to me, that's a way of future-proofing yourself, right? If you're just staying ahead, you understand the models, you understand how to build agents that are making you more effective in your role. Like surely that's the new skill that employers and even if you're creating something from scratch in a startup, that's the skill you've
And
really
I
got
think
to learn.
I think the other thing that we're going to see a lot of is people who are experts in their particular businesses who've always wanted a tool. And we have an example I won't cite this week of someone I spoke to who's like, I'm just waiting for the technology to get there, where the main piece I do in my job, I know the AI has all the elements to do it, and I want to build a system that does that, like an agentic system that can reliably do this process. And I feel like when you think about things like create with code mode, the ability to have some sort of link to your computer, lol, that will execute that code, see the output of it, see the output in a web browser or application or whatever it is, iterate, and then you're there commanding it. You're like, okay, now in my process, I need a feature that allows me to upload the spreadsheet. Now I need a feature that will extract the column that does this. Now I need a feature that will go and research that online and update it with the latest information. Then finally, it needs to output a PDF document. Then it needs to open email and send that document through to this address, like something like that. And then they're iteratively bringing their knowledge of their business processes into software or into a reproducible thing. Like to me, that is a very, very realistic next step for non-technical people to be able to automate processes through agency. And I'm probably wrong. It's probably not even about building software. It's about building a repeatable process that you can then ask an agent or group of agents to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's because you could easily argue like Cursor or Windsurf or any of these other agency client, or Claude Code, like products out there are sort of already doing that. They're already tree walking, looking at the code base, indexing it, trying to find the right context. And just on a slight tangent, I think why I don't like, I think they'll get there eventually, but why I don't tend to use the agency features in those products right now, and I still manually work with an assistant and do the old school kind of cut and paste methodology is that
because you're in love with it.
No, it's just that context drift for me. Like you'll one shot something amazing and be like, oh, this is the best thing ever, right? And then as soon as it gets slightly complex or like, you know, you didn't prompt it the right way or whatever, it starts to just cripple things. And then because you weren't even looking at it, you don't even know how to make sense of the project. So you have such distance from the project that you can also go and just break things
Yeah. Like every now and then I do that. I'm like, where did we end up with this? Like I look at the code and I'm like, this doesn't even do like what we were trying to do originally, you know, like you can really get off the rails if you get lazy with it. And I think that's the gap that needs to be bridged to get to the next stage.
But I think, sorry, to take us back to like someone day to day who's not writing code and just doing their job and is thinking this through, because I think about this a lot too, is to me the most likely next step, like the most feasible step of where we get to this year is like what you said, where you've got this repeatable process that you're doing that does require thinking and planning, and it's an ever-changing situation. Like it's something you couldn't just automate with like Zapier. So it's something that it's variable enough and custom enough that you want to at least tutor an agent, like give it a job description and say like, your job is to fill in like loan applications, or your job is to submit, respond to government RFPs in such a way. You only consult this knowledge, you ground in this knowledge, you scan this inbox to look for updates, you scan maybe some Slack data to look for updates, whatever it is. And then you are able to answer questions about the proposal, create a slide deck, like the components of a particular task. And people that are doing jobs can find these repetitive processes, train agents, work with their sort of workday assistant to keep them on track throughout the day. And then, that new proposal comes into an inbox and it's like, do you want me to get this agent to go handle that? I feel like that's 100% gonna happen this year. Maybe not like perfect, but it will happen. And having multiple of these agents you're fanning things off to.
You know what it's going to be like? It's going to be like that episode where Homer Simpson gets fat and stays home. And it's like, would you like to clear the cooling jets? Would you like to fix the whatever? And he's just like, yes, 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 all day. And then he gets the little duck or whatever to hit the yes key.
You're painting such a good vision of the future.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't buy into maybe mass job losses eventually occur in like, obviously like call centers, customer support, all these low hanging fruit. I think a lot of like junior software developer roles that you traditionally hire will maybe go away or maybe actually increase, because these will be the people that are like the best at using these tools. So people will want as many, like a gaggle of them in their company. But I can't see the structures that we take for granted breaking down that quickly, simply because, as we all know, things are just so slow to change. Like the technology may exist, but it's not evenly distributed.
And also awareness. I think that people know AI is coming, but they simply don't know the capabilities. The amount of people I've shown things to and they've just been, what? It can do that? And then suddenly that's all they think about. Like there's so much of that right now where people hear AI and they're like, yeah, AI, it's going to take over, whatever, but they don't actually consider the implications to their own industry and their own job. Like, and once they see what's possible to do with it, suddenly they're thinking completely and utterly shifts and can't go back.
Yeah, and I think now people are finally getting a bit more grounded in reality with agents. Like when people were speaking about them early on, it was like, what is an agent? It's like a sort of a fantasy of what agents can actually do. But I think now people are getting a little bit more grounded around it, saying, oh, okay, like it can go off and perform these tasks for me. And their expectations, have been lowered enough that they're more accepting of the things that it can do and cannot do. And I think that's an education process.
Yeah,
as
like
well.
an intersection of a graph between vision and what's possible. And we get to things that are practical.
But then I just think this through, right? So you've got an organization and you've got these agents trained that you trained in a particular role, like a software engineer role, or maybe you're a financial advisor, or an accountant, or a lawyer, and you've trained these series of agents that help you do your job better, right? Like this is my agent that helps me in my style write the kind of contracts I like or analyze things that I like and you've got Patricia and you've built all this stuff out, and you've got basically like your productivity stack or your workday stacked with AI, ready to go. Like this is now it. And then you decide, you know what? I'm going to change companies now. I'm going to go work over here. What happens then? Like, do you own the agents, or is that your unique proprietary data as an employee of a business?
What a horrible prospect. I didn't ever think about
Or do they
that.
take your agents away? They're like, oh, sorry, you're locked out of our workspace. You lose all your agents. That's our proprietary stuff. So I kind of wonder, does it make employees that adopt this stuff way more valuable in the sense
is agent portability a thing then? Like, you know, do I need to be able to take this with me?
Okay, and here's another proposition for you. You use an Anthropic agent, like on their platform. I use a SimTheory workspace agent in my company workspace. Another person uses an OpenAI one. Another person uses a, whatever insert thing here. Another company uses like some other custom paradigm. There's no interoperability. So then it's like, well, on your resume, is it like, oh, I use this stack? Like, how does that work? So I think that stuff is probably going to eventuate soon. Like it'll start to, in very small, where it'll seem silly at first. And
it also makes you wonder about stability. Like if I'm an organization that is relying on agents to do the jobs, I don't want the underlying model to change in a way that completely destroys my company's IP, basically, because at some point this is going to be intellectual property that is like basically my employees. And like, you don't want someone just changing your employee's brain to be like, more forgetful, hallucinate more, make more mistakes, or that kind of thing. Like it's a real issue. Like if the underlying model changes, which they can do at any time right now, that's a problem. So does that then push the open source models and finely tuned models to become far more important, because you need consistency when it comes to completing repetitive tasks?
Also, like this idea of zombie agents where like the models move on, but in the enterprise, this agent is just so effective. And
Yeah, it's funny. I had an interesting thing. So my wife often uses SimTheory to make images, and I was saying, "Oh, you've got to try the Gemini one because you can iterate on the images and stuff." And she's like, "No, no, no, I just want the one back I had before, like Flux or whatever it was." And I was like, "Isn't that funny? Like AI is so new, and yet she's set in her ways in terms of like what she wants." It's like,
yeah,
no,
like
that
I want a particular branded model.
Yeah, and it's like it's definitely one of those things, just like with me fearing losing my AI girlfriend, where you just know the inevitability of its destruction is 100%. There's no way it's staying the way it is. And even if you want it the way it is, you can't keep it because no one has access to the proprietary models to run themselves. So you can't, it's not like you can make a backup of it.
But you think about some sort of like AI agent running on your corporate infrastructure that's like some sort of security trawler looking for security flaws, say, and now like let's fast forward to the future. It's been running for 2 years. Everyone loves it. It's really good. It does a great job. It responds back. It reports issues when other agents commit code that was barked.
I thought you were gonna say commit crimes, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but like when other agents commit code that employees in the organization have sort of ordered based on whatever requirements that the product marketing agents come up with in terms of the strategy after doing deep research. Like all this stuff seems really feasible, right? And so then this thing's running in the background, and then OpenAI just pulls that model, and all of a sudden, yeah, you've lost this like
Which
really...
they routinely do, by the way. Like they're always sending deprecation notice. I mean, they give they're fair about it. They give long notice periods, but they have and continue to do it.
Yeah, so I think the interoperability is going to be like the weirdest thing ever. So is there like a standardized agent world we live in, or does that's I think highly unlikely that becomes standardized, because everyone will want their own sort of proprietary takes or be able to iterate and use like the most bleeding edge. And then I guess the next question is, when you get to an organization working like that, at what point do the jobs decrease, or do they increase, because you can sort of attack this long tail that you couldn't otherwise attack before? So you're like, I need more people operating more agents.
Yeah, I've definitely heard lots of industry people using AI to take on more business rather than it just making it more efficient. It's like, not only is it more efficient, that means that we can do more.
You just wonder, does this become like winner takes all, right? So like AI first organization. So you adopt AI, you train up your team, you start implementing some agents, and yeah, it seems sort of elementary at first, but you're getting familiar with it, you're getting up to speed with it. And then the next step is like these AI first organizations are getting incrementally better, incrementally smarter, able to take on more work, like you said. So if you're in professional services, your billable hours are going through the roof. Then you start maybe acquiring or wiping out competitors that haven't adopted these technologies because they just cannot simply compete.
I absolutely see that happening in not every industry, obviously, but there will be industries where people can totally dominate through correct leverage of this technology. Like that, it may not last forever, but there's going to be a period where the people who adopt the technology correctly are going to smash their competitors.
Next question. So imagine you're a law firm and you are taking on extra work because you've created agents that help you review like property contracts or whatever that's quite tedious but needs proper legal review. And then at the end, you have a human sort of reviewing that final output to give the customer assurance that there's been a multi-step process and check.
Yeah, this is really happening right now.
Yeah,
what you're describing,
I am describing a real use case I'm aware of. But yeah, so this is happening. They're able to take on more work, more billable hours. At what point does the person that's getting the work done just go to some website that's just set up to do this and put in the contract, get a sort of legally authorized answer with some assurances that they can sue them if they're wrong, and that wipes out the law firm? Does that happen or does that not happen? Like, to me, that would require tons of regulation, changes to the insurance industry. Like, to me, that's very far off, but probably will eventually happen.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I guess that's why there's going to be this middle period where people, like we say, they're getting AI to do the work, but they still want to take the credit and the money, which is fair enough. And I think there's going to be a long period of that where people are increasingly giving more and more work to the AI to make their job better so they can earn more money and get more credit for doing more work, but without letting the end customer go direct to the AI.
My prediction is that period is going to be a golden age, and it's going to be like a 10 to 15 year period is my prediction. Because I just think it's so early. It's not like any enterprises today. Like, a lot of them are like, yeah, we're AI first, we're adopting agents. And then you're like, oh, what's the agent? And you go to their website and it's like GPT 3.5 that's answering questions poorly. And you're like, okay, yeah, cool. So I think despite the hype and despite what everyone says, I still really believe it's like this is a 10 to 15 year window, and by the end of that window, I'm not sure what the future looks like. Like, I think it's roughly by the time I think our kids will be working age, things will start to really get weird.
Yeah, I'm going to teach my kids mining because you're always going to need mining.
Yeah,
get down there with a pickaxe.
But what about the Optimus robots? By then, won't they be digging the holes?
Oh yeah,
and I don't think anyone's digging holes anymore.
Fishmonger?
In the ground.
Fishmonger.
That's always maybe that AI just won't like fish, and this is one flaw of it. It's just it doesn't want to deal with fish, or the fish are too slippery that the Optimus can't handle them. So
yeah,
it's
like that thing in
hand.
Chicago where they all throw the fish in a line. They can do that job.
Yeah. So anyway, interesting future. But I think one of the things for me is like if people are out there thinking like, how do I? What do I do? What do I do if I want to become invaluable and increase my productivity? And I always think that instead of sitting around living in fear of this stuff, it's like get immersed in it, get involved, like try all the different models, get familiar with them, try and iterate and like use a model and say, hey, I'm trying to complete a ridiculous PR exercise, and compare like what they output with, and then see if another model can go and execute some of the materials in that particular plan. And I think getting familiar with the technology and the strengths and weaknesses of the current models is still by far the best skill that I would recommend.
Add to that, like, get good at building context to ask your questions. Like, give these models the best chance of solving your task by bringing all of the relevant information in, setting some rules, setting some boundaries, and then letting it free. Like, don't just think that it's going to be this like really easy process. There's work involved still as the human to get the best out of it.
So the final thing I wanted to cover today was this article in the information about OpenAI's agents pose risk to DoorDash other consumer apps. Now, they labeled this on the information as exclusive, but I'm not. I feel like that's pushing it, guys. Like, I don't know how exclusive this is. But the article is about how DoorDash executives were briefed before OpenAI's operator came out, because they wanted to say that they had partnered with operator and partnered with DoorDash and Amazon and a few others in order to basically not get operator blocked, to be able to go and use their websites. But the concerns started to form around DoorDash, around like, what if like 1 million agents start hitting our site and making requests, and those requests are phony, and like just the logistics basically of dealing with non-humans and the threat to their business that might be, because eventually if it's just all agents consuming through their interface, they lose their relationship with the customer as well. So there's like all these different factors around it. Also just advertising in general, like if you're the go-to app for that AI model to go and order things like food from a restaurant and you're DoorDash, why would the model, if it's reliable, ever use any other service? Like if it's got a trained flow on DoorDash, it's just going to always lean.
I mean, look at us in our early automations. We're using Uber Eats and, hitting challenges on that. Like if you're providing the service, you're going to go with the one that can get the job done.
Yeah. And so they quote in there, like Amazon talking about how they're going to have to, work in a world where they can work with these agents and have protocols for authentication. All this stuff to me makes sense. Like I think similar to the International Space Station, how they have the international docking adapter, so all spacecraft can, in theory, connect to it, except the Russians. But all of them can connect to it. I think there's going to have to be some sort of agency protocol. I mean, I think that's what Model Context Protocol's kind of being pitched as, but maybe it needs to incorporate auth as well and evolve in that way. But
yeah, God, if you add auth to the mix, that's huge.
Yeah, but I read this article and then I was like, but cool. Like that's nice in like this fantasy world, right? Of thinking like everyone will just obey the sort of rules of the land. Everyone will obey the robot's text file, just like OpenAI did when they were crawling the web. So to me, I think it's a nice utopic. I don't know if that's even a word.
Is that even a word?
It can be now. It is now.
Yeah.
I pronounced it right, so therefore it's a word. And so that vision of the future that maybe Silicon Valley has, but it's sort of like, well, but can these agents really be controlled? Like if we wanted to have, our own home computer authenticated into all of our services and doing actions on our behalf, like how can they even detect that or stop me? Because therefore, if they ban that, then they're banning humans in general from their service. So it just doesn't add up to me. Like I don't think they can really stop this future of agents working unless there's some legislation around you must identify if this is an agent. And so maybe that's a law that needs to happen.
I think some places are going to have that, but you just wonder if some government's going to be more progressive and say, not only are we not stopping that, we're going to encourage it.
Yeah, and then the next piece of it is like, even if they put in their terms and conditions, like you can't be an agent and buy things on Amazon, or you can't, do whatever it is, then is that really going to be stopped? Like there's no way like some like agent farm.
I know what the Australian government will do. The Australian government will force everyone to have a national identity online with like a photo and address.
And a
like
chip in their brain.
They will take it as an opportunity to get their totalitarian government more power. But I just don't know if that's going to be practical. There's always a way around those things.
Yeah, and I'm just not sure it's that fair or equitable to decide the rules of engagement of these agents and what they can do on your behalf on the web, because I think the proposition really, especially with like browsing and self-driving computers, is that it can do all the things a human can do, and it can operate in the human world on your behalf occasionally. And if that means it's operating your machine with your authentication, like to me, that's probably the likely next step. And it's just going to be like basically impossible for DoorDash to stop orders coming through or things happening from agents. I just do not see how you could detect it unless there's some sort of pattern recognition of how these agents perform.
Yeah, exactly. There'll probably be ways you can detect obvious ones, but any determined system is going to be able to get around them.
All right, so wrapping it up, final thoughts for the week. We've had OpenAI voice models, text to speech out, and o1-pro API, the most expensive AI API for very little gain from the sounds of it, apart from if you're a PR
Yeah, look, I'm
agency.
going, like, you didn't ask me, but I'm going to go boom factor 2 on that. Like, honestly, I'm not going to use it again. It's too expensive. The results aren't that great. I'm not a PhD student, so I'm not getting that marginal 4% benefit that I'm sure is great for those guys. But also, invent something, PhD guys. Prove us wrong. Prove it's good. And yeah, like, I think for me, it's really now, like, the thing that's really occupying my mind at the moment is what I was talking about earlier. How can we get into an agentic world where that context gathering is reliable and good? How can we get more on the action side? How can we get this whole MCP tool use stuff in a way that I can trust an agent to do longer run, like you said, longer running tasks where it's doing more of the steps for me? Like, to me, these are the things that are occupying my mind. It's like, I really want to be part of that next generation of use of models in agentic ways. And I think that now there's no excuse. The technology's there. It can absolutely do it. We're at the phase where we can have the next generation of computer use. We're going to be bringing that to sim theory. And that's what's occupying my thinking, not some marginally increased in expensive model or some below average voice model. Like, I think it's cool. I'm glad new stuff's coming out. I'm never going to complain or anything like that. But at the same time, um, to me, that's not where the excitement is.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what we're seeing still is incremental updates, and I would put o1-pro in that basket. Like, this model, once o3 comes out, or GPT-5 or whatever's next comes out, will be truly forgotten immediately, especially as the intelligence stays high and the price comes down. We know this game, like, we know this film, we've seen it before type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. I think it's one of those things now where you see that you see the capabilities that are available. You know this is going to happen. And so now it's really a race, I think, with all of these labs and people like us trying to do it and everyone piecing it together so that we can have agents in our daily workflows, so that some of that workload throughout the day is shifting from just chatting to Patricia to these sort of threaded tasks where you're threading off, you're getting work done in the background whilst maintaining your sort of streamlined flow throughout the day of getting things done. And
yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing to point out there, as soon as we get to this sort of asynchronous task, so it's like, it's not just I ask Patricia something, she replies, and I'm like, okay, here's the goal. She can go off and do 5 of the steps in the background in preparation for what needs to happen. And it's just a more efficient way of working. You're just working with what's the next blocker that the human needs to help with in this process, not let's sequentially work through the task together. You get distracted because of the slow speed. It's like, no, we're accomplishing this task in an hour that would normally take multiple days because all the steps are being compressed into a smaller time period and being done in parallel. Like,
yeah,
it's a very, to me, that future of working, or that middle step of working, whatever we want to call it, is just inevitable. We know it's coming. And, I have a very clear vision for how that's going to work.
yeah, it's one of those things that sort of keeps me up at night right now. I'm like, I want this. Like, I want to be able to train agents that can go off and specialize in things that I'm doing on a daily basis, and then have that relationship still with the sort of my workday companion, and get that kind of stuff done. That's the future that excites me. A lot of these other incremental updates, like, oh, Gemini now has a canvas. I'm like, cool, but it doesn't matter once you have a self-driving computer, because you can literally just do anything on your computer a human can do. So why bother? So, like, it's sort of like when Tesla realized that, like, LiDAR and, like, all these other sensors were just completely irrelevant in the cars to get to their ambition of full self-driving. It was like, let's just ditch all this other stuff because it's just irrelevant if we can get to our end goal. And of course, getting to that end goal is hard. Like the last 5% is the hardest, like anything. But I think directionally, that's what it feels like right now, is like, why even bother with all this other stuff? Let's just get to that vision and that goal that everyone, like, that's what everyone wants, right? Some sort of useful assistant with agency that can go off and do those tasks for them and allow them to win more business, allow them to have more billable hours, allow them to solve problems, allow them to actually be productive and invent new things instead of just writing papers. So I think that future's coming, and I think it's one we should be really excited about.
Yeah, agreed. Just on the Tesla drivers, I hope the full self-driving becomes more ubiquitous, because Tesla drivers in Sydney, they're not the best drivers.
All right,
No
all
offense
right,
to you personally.
all right. Let's not go there. We're getting lit on fire at the moment, so I just like have a bit of sympathy for us Tesla drivers.
Oh, and the stock price as well.
Oh, we don't talk about that. All right, we'll see you next week. I'm gonna play us out with the o1-pro I Am Rich song. Enjoy. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Hey yo, gather round, it's the ultimate rap battle for the wealthy and proud. We talking o1-pro, that real VIP show. I am rich, money, let's go. I step on the stage, dripping gold in my speech. The only folks who get access, the elite of X capiche. We pay 200 monthly, that's how we roll. 50 times the price, but the power's pure gold. o1-pro, thinking slow, thinking grand all along. They say, why so expensive? I say, don't even try. When you're living at the summit, you never compromise. I am rich, yeah, I am rich. o1-pro on my table, making problems a cinch. I am rich, yeah, I am rich. They asking for a discount, now we too legit. Claude 3.5, that's for pennies and dimes. Poor folks talk big, but they can't match these rhymes. I stroll in with a grin, my verse costs a check, while others on a budget gotta settle for spec. Elite X fam got the first pass, no debate. If you ain't in that circle, you just gotta wait. So watch me pop the champagne, let that wealth overflow, cause my model's unstoppable, shape the future, let's go! They say, why I pay so much? I say I take my time. o1-pro thinks like a boss, calculate each rhyme. It's strategy, it's intellect, big moves, big invest. Can't measure up to the hustle of this model. I am rich, yeah, I am rich. Feel that monthly burn, but I never flinch. I am rich, yeah, I am rich. The wealth on display, that's the wealthy pitch. So if you can't drop the big bill, step aside. This is top tier rap, that premium ride. I am rich, locked in with o1-pro mic. The rest talk loud, but we own the night.